The human population. We are finally here to some very controversial topics. The human population size, affluence, resource consumption, they all are interrelated and they all impact the environment. Probably one of the best examples that most of my students know is China. China is striking with more than 1.3 billion people. That's almost 20% of all humans live in China. Impacts on the environment may occur locally or within the borders of a region, a city, or a country, or they may be global scaled. So the scale of the impact depends on the nature of the economy and to the degree at which society has developed. For example, a person may create a local impact by using products that are created within its own country's borders. The same person may create a global impact by using materials that are imported. In addition to the local and global impacts, some people impact specific people who live in urban environments. In general, highly localized impacts are typically to rural agriculture areas. Most of the materials consumed in developed countries are produced locally. While this may benefit like the local economy, it can lead to regionally overuse of that one particular resource, which is ultimately environmental degradation. So, too commonly, overused local resources are land itself, wood, and from trees and plants. So the growing population in the local area requires an increased amount of food. In developing countries that do not import their food, because that does exist still today, local demand for agricultural land is increases directly with population size. But to put more land into like cultivation and farming and stuff, and to convert forest into like cropland, degrades the environment. So Brazil, for example, provides an example of land overuse and degradation. The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that Brazil, which is approximately 3 million hectares, that's a 7.5 million acres, were cleared per year during 2000 to 2005. So some of the land was used for small-scale agriculture and some industrial production of like soybeans, sugarcane, and corn. So the local environmental impacts of converting land to agriculture also increases erosion, soil degradation, and pretty much loss of all habitat. Because where you lived in the rainforest and it is now a cornfield, you can normally not make that and adapt that be your new home. So agriculture has a global impact as well as a local impact. So where it occurs in developed or developing nations is also really specific to that country. Conversion of land to agriculture reduces the total amount of atmospheric carbon dioxide uptake in plants, which we haven't even talked about. It's just one more thing, which is affects the global carbon cycle. So in addition to all these factors, you also increase the use of fertilizers, and fertilizers are usually made from fossil fuels, and so again we release more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and so this one local thing has now a global impact, and this is just more common in affluent, wealthier areas. In urban societies because they tend to like specialize in the production of some sort of technology. So, for example, like more than half of the ecological footprint of the United States comes from the use of fossil fuels, of which approximately 50% of those fossil fuels are imported from China. So China's ecological footprint has more than doubled since 1970, and its ratio of local to global impact has shifted. So most of its ecological footprint was previously driven by the demand for food, fiber, cotton, things that its people needed. But now in recent years, China's demand for fossil fuel has increased dramatically. And so even though the environmental impact is at China, we're also purchasing it. So it's almost like it's a double impact. It has increased their economy, which has allowed them to buy more fossil fuels, which now they need more fossil fuels because they're selling us more fossil fuels. And so it's just this positive feedback loop that it's stuck in. Urban populations represent about half of all humans on the planet, and they consume 3/4 of Earth's resources. So while definitions vary like country to country as far as like what an urban area is, according to the United States, 386 people per square kilometer, that's about 1,000 people per square mile, is considered urban. So New York City is the most dense populated area in the United States. It has over 10,500 people per square kilometer. That's 27,000 people per square mile. India, all right, so you remember the growth of India and how it is a pyramid. Well, it's the most densely populated city. Mumbai is the most densely populated city in the world, and it has 23,000 people per square kilometer. That's 60,000 people per square mile. That's double. That's double New York City. All right. So more than 75% of the people in developed countries live in urban areas. And it's always at this point in the conversation and in the lecture where I just appreciate the very green drive on the way to the high school every morning. We have all this space in between us, so it's delightful and a rarity in our planet. More than half of the world's population live in urban settings by about 2030. So if you look at this graph where it has the world's developed countries and developing countries, you're looking at 2007's recorded data and predicted 2030. And that's the percentage of people who are going to live in what we would call an urban area, more than 1,000 people per square mile. I mean, it's a cute graph and all, but yeah, we could have told you that it was going to increase all the way around. And just saying. So in this table, we see the largest 20 urban areas of the world, ranking Tokyo, Japan up there with its extremely declining population, but at 37 million in a very dense, very wealthy, populated area. Well, the country's really small, right? Like when you think about it, it's really small compared to like India and even China and Brazil. We'll go all the way down onto Egypt. Egypt has now made the cut. I think this was published in 2015. In Nigeria and Turkey are still there. But these are like urban areas, cities, essentially, from around the world. And Japan's on here more than once. So my future environmental engineers, if you're wanting to make money and solve city problems, there's the top 20 cities that you might want to consider moving to after college. Because those are the ones that are going to have all kinds of problems by the time you're done with college. Sustainable development is common. I mean, that is just a goal all the way around the world and the theme of our STEM program. So according to a ecosystem assessment, ecosystem sustainability will be threatened if human population continues along its current path and the resource consumption around the globe does not change or cease or we don't find new technology. So the continued alterations to ecosystems that have improved human health and well-being, basically having greater access to food, clean water, and housing, those are also going to exacerbate in poverty in some populations. So the areas where we have very, very high dense resources, as our population grows, we are going to take those resources, and those are going to go to the wealthiest people. That's basically what that said. If we establish sustainable practices, we may be able to improve it. If not, we're not going to solve this problem. We're not going to go and, give everyone birth control. I mean, you're not Kenya. But you can improve the standard of living and for a huge amount of people if we increase sustainability. All right, so just as a side note here, how can we achieve this sustainable development? There's really no simple answer to that question, nor is there one like single path that we must follow. There's a Millennium Ecosystem Assessment Project. It was started around like early 2000s, 2005, and it offers some sort of insight. It's basically a report that consists of a global analysis of the effects of human populations on ecosystems and, of course, services like water, trees, things like that. And there's just definitely like a blueprint of what sustainability looks like, but no one really knows. And we just now know that hopefully you've looked at all these graphs because they are all like increasing to the right. And that's about to be your problem. That is your generation's problem. This project of human actions are developing on Earth, but putting such a strain on the environment and its availability will definitely cause a problem for your generation. Your generations can no longer be take the planet for granted anymore if you want to continue the lifestyle that you have. So, I suggest that sustainability as well as sustainable development be something that is achieved. Environmental construction and engineering and food replacement, these are all things that are no longer hippie talk. We're talking about raising raising crickets in large towers and grinding them up into a flour and making protein bars to like feed your kids because there's like no longer land for cows to roam on and graze on. So we're there, folks.